Welcome, everyone. It's great to have you along, Dr. Kathryn. I keep on calling her Dr. K. I don't know whether she likes that or not.
Oh, that's fine.
And me, Simon da Roza. Wonderful to have you here today. I'm loving this series because, as educators for so long, we've been dealing with the symptoms in the classroom of, forgetting, not being organised, copying, all those things. But we're dealing with the symptoms of ADHD or neurodiversity, and we haven't been dealing with the cause. And I think this is kind of matching, really dealing with the cause and not the symptoms. So I think there's some great solutions here, and I think we've had some great feedback for this series too. Anyway, how'd you go, Dr. K? You've got that on there. I've actually got a copy here. So this if you want, ladies and gentlemen and viewers, what we can do is, if you haven't got a copy of this little infographic, do drop us your email down here, and we'll make sure we send you a PDF copy so you can print it off and share it around all over the place, because I think that's what we're about. We're about trying to change the narrative around neurodiversity and ADHD.
Implementing these strategies is helpful for all the students in the classroom and helps all the students build their executive functioning skills. And just because they may be more advanced than some of the other students doesn't mean that they don't need support working on them.
Oh, look, absolutely. This is what I always say, is good teaching is good teaching. And this is great for the neurodiverse kids, but it's good for everyone. In fact, I'll guarantee you that if you start doing some of these things, you're going to have a calmer, more productive, more focused classroom. And I think our friend Alyssa would like that as well. Yeah. All right. So one of the things I was going to start with today is, if we're ready to start, Dr. Kathryn?
I think so.
Dr. K? Okay. Well, I'm sure we've all had in that class, and I'm thinking primary at the moment, where the kids are kind of you've just given the instructions, you've done a great job, you're feeling really good because they were good and concise and clear, and then someone just blurts out all of a sudden, "What do I have to do? What was that?" And oh man, come on, I thought I did a good job. And you repeat the same thing, and you kind of get that look going, "Oh yeah, I get it." And you watch them go to their seat and they've got no idea. No idea. Now, you might be saying that all kids do this. Well, what we're after and what you're looking for is how often it happens, and the duration, and I suppose the intensity as well. That's what differentiates between a kid who's just having a bad day, or not enough sleep, or just having hassles somewhere else, and a neurodiverse kid who's struggling with planning, sequencing, and organising. So one of the things I say to them is, write it down. If you can, write it down. But as I'm discovering lately, when you write it down, that's still visual. I'm sorry, it's still language, it's still words. If we can draw it down and switch it, if we can get them to imagine what the next step is, see themselves moving, getting their pencil, getting their book, getting back to their seat, if we can actually help guide them with that visual kind of storytelling, they're more likely to get it down. So I'd like to add to this already. Write it down and draw it down. But I've also put record there because, and I get high school teachers going, well, they shouldn't be allowed to use their cameras. But look, it's a matter of perspective. It's sometimes, you get that should conversation. Well, they should be able to do this and they should be able to do that. All of a sudden we're making this comparison, which is unfair, because the only true comparison is the comparison to themselves. But taking a photograph, writing it down, having a Word document open which you type it into, these are all things which are going to make the classrooms run smoother. And it might seem different to all the other kids, but as you and I have spoken before, Dr. K, it's about educational fairness. It's about getting about what you need to succeed. not about everyone getting the same amount.
Well,
So
sorry.
writing it down really attacks that forgetting. Sorry, I cut you off there.
That's
Okay?
all right. One thing that I wanted to mention is figure out what you're trying to get out of the exercise, because there's so many things when teachers say, oh yeah, well they should be able to do that. And like, but is that the point of what you're getting them to do? Is the point of the homework assignment making sure that they can copy it down? Because they're not going to be able to do it if they don't have a record of it. So if it's as simple as them taking a photo of the assignment on the board so they complete it at home, then how is that cheating, right? It's not cheating. It's not giving them an unfair advantage to their peers. You can write it down quickly. If they have a written output issue or transcription issue, like why is that seen as an unfair advantage if one really is just trying to level the playing field for them, right? And for your
Yes, exactly.
and for your example of the kid that doesn't know, you tell them what to do, you're going to go get your pencil, just create a little infographic. I think it's something that I might do after we talk, actually, for a little, thing that you tape on their desk. Find your pencil. Like, so they sit down on their desk and they see it taped on the desk. Find your pencil. When you get an assignment, you write your name on the top of the page. Because as any teacher knows, how many pages do you get without a name on the top? And then it's doing, your printing analysis to try and figure out who wrote which answers. And those are, if it just means having a little infographic taped on their desk so they have that reminder, or even like, again, I think it was it last week or this week? I think it's this week that we're covering about sending a picture of how things should look, right? So if you have that desk diagram of what it should look like in their desk and okay, here's where your pencil is going to be. And, these simple things that some people may think they shouldn't have to do is really overwhelming. And especially when there's so much going on. I mean, think about children that have a messy room and they have no idea where to start when you say, okay, clean up your room. And they're like, I'm so overwhelmed. I don't there's everything everywhere and I don't know the first step. You need to tell me, I want you to pick up this toy and put it in this position. And many people may think that's like just too babyish, but at that point is what they need to get the job and the task started.
Yeah, look, you're spot on. It's that comparison which is tricky too. But yeah, why not? What is the most important thing here? And to me, the most important thing is, good morning, Leanne. The most important thing is learning and getting kids to love learning themselves. That's what we want to get that spark going. But look, could I also say too that it's pretty easy to spot the noisy person who's always asking for things and checking in. But one of the things I learned about girls, because girls present with a different skill set when they come to school. Girls, for people watching, have ADHD just as much as boys, I believe, but they're much harder to find because of the skill set. And we tend to find them later on when there are big changes to high school. But you can actually have a very high achieving young girl. And I wonder how many kids I've missed, because I've seen girls come up to me quietly after everyone's on task and they've just checked in with me again. And maybe very politely they've come up and going, oh, Mr. D, I just want to make sure I get it right. And that could be the short-term memory coming in. It might be the anxiety that's starting to develop, or that lack of confidence too. But they can be the inattentive ADHD, which teachers find really hard to, or not ignore, but to believe. I think actually believe that child could have ADHD. Oh, look, we've got to make it fun too. I used to just write on the tables. I used to freak kids out when I'd write their instructions just on the table. Oh, he's right on the table. Oh my goodness. So, will you go and tell the principal? Anyway, moving on. I'll tell you what, writing down, especially when I found with high schoolers too, getting them to write it down is one battle, or record it. But getting them to open it up and read it and then action it, oh gosh, that's another story completely. And That's where routines and habits. Was there anything else, Dr. K, you want to talk on before we move on to perhaps making time visual?
Well, I was thinking that just as a reminder, I know I have some great posts where I actually go into the definitions of, ADHD hyperactive, ADHD inattentive, and ADHD combined. And what I might do is pop those links below so anyone watching can get a better understanding of what the difference is and how they present. Because as you were saying, a lot of girls are just missed because they don't have that hyperactive component or the coping mechanisms that they use. They want to be the quiet one, and they're fine, being not involved in the situation and daydreaming because of the inactivity and attentiveness. And we just need to figure out how to recognize those individuals. And like you were saying, the transitions are where we're going to see this the most, and that's where the people get the identification happening, right?
Yeah. I think if as a teacher sitting there going, "Oh, don't I want kids like that? The quiet and attentive kids." Yeah, you kind of do, and that's why I don't think we want to find a problem either. Not that it is a problem; it's a difference of thinking. But early intervention is just so very important. And one of the things that we know is that a late diagnosis of ADHD can lead to much poorer health outcomes for our children. There are a lot of statistics around ADHD people dying much younger than the average population. So yeah, it is really important to find. But I think we're getting better at it. All right. So we like to move on to make time visual.
Yes.
Fantastic. Well, look, actually, I came across this probably accidentally when I found a visual clock by Sue Larkey, which is a wonderful lady here that works in Australia, and it was not a countdown clock, but it was a clock which showed time.
Yeah, up here we have the time timer up here. It's one that you can purchase, and then you can do it, and then the redness comes, and then it slowly closes. Yeah.
Look, I think that's definitely a step in the right direction. But if you've got a visual kind of schedule for the day or a daily planner, putting clocks next to it with the progression of time, because again, those numbers are like words, and our kids are thinking in pictures. So if we can make it as visual as we can, I mean, photographs are great. And I found that the work that I was doing with autistic kids in my classes, if we had real photographs of what those children were doing, not just the generic ones, but at recess or lunchtime, and them at science or doing English and writing, they helped the children see what was coming up. And also, I felt that really helped them with the transitions as well. And I can talk more about that later because I've got number 4 out of 7, I reckon, is a ripper of these schedules. But if we can make time as visual as we possibly can, I've seen people colouring in clocks as well, saying, okay, you've got this much time. I used to actually put one of those time timers next to the front of the television. So if the kids were gaming, they knew that once they'd run out of bread, it was time to get to a save point. And or be done by a save point as well. The countdown timers, which you might be thinking might be just as good, actually can add a lot more stress to them. And it's a funny thing because sometimes our older students who are in high school who are really motivated by the deadlines, when they're in primary, it's not the same. Because they don't understand the release of dopamine, blah, 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 blah. So a countdown timer can actually add more stress to them. What are your thoughts on that, Dr. K?
Again, I think it depends on the individual. I mean, some people really having that auditory alert that, there's 5 minutes left. I think that's helpful for some. But I think you really need to know who you're working with. Yes. But I think it's a distraction for a lot, and it depends on the activity that they're doing too, right? Like if it's something that they really enjoy doing, I think it can definitely bring the anxiety up. But if it's a task that they're not too fond of, it's like, okay, I only have to work, so much harder for 2 more minutes or 3 more minutes. And I actually, whenever I hear about, those audio timers, my mother-in-law has one for cooking. It's like 4 minutes left. I think they're from IKEA. And I can just hear it. So.
Yeah. Hey, do you have the beat test over
Beat
there
test.
in Canada? It's a fitness test, and you had to run across a certain distance every time it beeped.
Oh, no, I don't know that one.
Quicker and quicker. Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. But look, you mentioned something which is really important too, and you said the individual,
Mm-hmm.
because every presentation of ADHD is different and unique. So this is where I thought this skill might be handy. Not all of these are going to work with every ADHD child. You've got to find what works for them. You've got to find their kind of what matches their thumbprint. Yeah, but if you can make time as visual as possible, and I know there's some creative minds out there that can do that, then you're really going to be making it a lot easier for the kids in your class. Okay.
One thought that I did have, and this isn't even an educational solution. I've grown up riding horses, and the place that I grew up riding at, we had one covered arena, and in Vancouver it rains a lot. The stereotype is true. And so they had color sections and 15-minute segments above the clock. So even if you have that as a way to visualize, okay, those are 15-minute chunks or 10-minute chunks, whatever you decide to make them at, so that the child doesn't necessarily need to know how to tell time, because looking at an analog clock can be very challenging for some students.
Yeah.
And, just knowing that, okay, well, when we get to this section, and you can have them different colors, like colors of the rainbow. So, in the green section, we're working on this. And when it gets to the blue section, kids that struggle with telling time can still, know the colors and know that they're looking for the long hand to be pointing at that color to know when it's going to happen.
Mm. Oh, look, you're absolutely right. And it points to something with younger children too. So if you can say, okay, we're going to be doing this after recess or after little lunch, pardon me, then it gives them an idea of, oh, that's when we have lunch. Or you say, oh, this is what we're going, that show's going to be on after dinner. Then they can picture dinner fairly easy because it's something they do all the time. So that gives them a visual reference for them to go, oh yeah, that's what it is, rather than small hand on the 7, the big hand on the 12. Yeah, and food.
Yes, food's often a motivator.
Yeah. It will take you as long as eating a burger.
Exactly.
Or eating a bunch of
your ice cream will melt if you wait this long.
Yeah. Yes, got it. All right. Okay, we talk too much, don't we, sometimes? Make routines and sequence steps visually. I found some of my older kids actually just liked a flowchart of yes, no, they could follow it. It's that simplification. And even if you take, again, photos of the kids, or draw images and pictures and place them in the order of what to do, get your pencil, then get your book, and then sit at your seat and then start writing. That's never going to happen, but the idea that came to my head at the time. But if you put those on the desk, it also reduces the cognitive load that these kids are under as well. If they forget it because of their short-term memory, they can just go, oh yeah, that's right, that comes, and then that comes, and then that comes as well. So that was my thought around making routines and steps as visual as possible.
Sounds good. You can even get those little the key rings, or like, I can't remember, the binder clips, and have little cards that you have laminated and have it so you can change the sequence, right? If you have a couple of these ready, and depending on the student's needs or the individual needs, create them for each task in the day, so that you can say, have them numbered. Okay, so first activity, and then once they're finished flipping through that deck, they can put it in a basket and for the next activity. So they have one for math, they have one for science. And it may seem a little bit labor intensive at the start, but I promise if this is working for
Yes.
that student, it's going to save you so much time in the long run, and it's going to give them so much more success. And that's what we're
Oh,
wanting, right?
absolutely. Yeah. And as we always say, we've got to go to where their skills are and where they're currently operating, and then build those bridges. Yeah, look, that's really important. I think that the visual, I was really stunned. I was working in a special school probably just 2 years ago, and they had those pet cards. And I had some non-verbal kids that I was working with, and I held up the pet card. I think I just pointed to it because it was on my chest, and I immediately got a response. They're very powerful. They're really powerful. I don't think us atypical people, or well, kind of typical, don't realise the importance of the power of those visual reminders too. Yeah. Mm. Well, great to have you along, Anna and Melanie. I can't really see who else is there. Have everything ready at their table. Isn't this
Yes.
just spoiling them, Dr. K?
Oh, yes, of course.
Aren't you just being a bit soft on them?
Yes, let's make them do something that's so stressful for them and cognitively taxing and adds anxiety. Like, you want to, when you're trying to work on something, just focus on the skills that you're trying to assess. I mean, it's the same thing when it comes to accommodations for learning disabilities. Or, if you're testing someone on the topic, then don't do it for them. But if it's not something that you're trying to test them on or get them to do, take that hurdle away. If you want them to do their homework, have everything in place so they don't have the
Yes.
excuse of trying to get everything there. You're going to save
Yeah.
everybody a lot of frustration and hassle.
Yeah. Oh, look, absolutely. And look, one of the rules I always knew about teaching kindergarten, that blunt pencils can destroy an entire kindergarten lesson like that. So you've got to have sharpened pencils for kindergarten. Yeah, and I know some of the kids that you're talking about, well, they should be able to do that. But if you just got it, they can get on with it. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the important thing
And
too.
save the
You
30
know,
minutes that they spend finding everything, right?
I know. And if you get them on task, then one, they're on task and learning. They're not disturbing you. They're not disturbing the others around them too. Oh, can I have a pencil? Have you got one? Have you got a spare? They're getting to the important stuff, which is learning.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Specific and timely feedbacks for steps in the right direction. There are a few things about executive functioning that kind of really overlap. And sometimes you can have a perfect storm because they interact so badly, and that leads to a complete meltdown. But I do find that you've got to catch them really quickly because of their concepts of time. And I don't mean just for saying, oh, good job, well done. I mean, well done, you sat down at your seat. You're giving them specific feedback. Oh, great, you've got your pencil in your hand and you're ready to go. Fantastic. So it's a bit of praise, but a bit of specific as well. It's a well done, good on you, great job. What I tended to do when I had an all boys class was, for every negative or constructive thing, I tried to hand out 7 positives. It's hard work. It's not easy. And I used to have prompts up around the classroom because sometimes I'd just be saying, good job, good job, good job. And because I've watched so many videos with American people in it, I'd be saying, good job, yeah, good job. And then the kids would be saying it to each other, good job. Oh no, let's be a little bit more specific about the kind of feedback and the praise too. But, as you and I both know, the best way to change a behaviour is not to stop it, but introduce a new one and let them know they're on the right track when they're doing it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think with training, any skill, whether it's, you need to make sure that you're giving them the right option to choose, right? You're saying, no, you can't do this and you can't do this. You try and box in three of the edges of the square and leave that one opening so they can have success. So you're closing the options that aren't the correct one, and you're giving the option that you want them to choose, making it the most attractive one, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
if they're, they could like, okay, well, here's a pencil for you. I want you to take it now, as opposed to, well, you can get it from these different places. This is the one I want you to take it from. But it just gives them, you're setting them up for failure, right? Set them up for success.
And there are, perhaps I should have prepared this too, and I saw it earlier this week, the amount of negatives that ADHD children tend to have. And I think it's phenomenal. I think there's about 40,000 more negatives that they hear. Maybe if someone's watching, they could fix that up for me or find it and just say hello if you're here. That's an incredible. So trying to find between 4 and 7 positive things, I think is a really important thing to do, And it can be as simple as a good thumbs up as well. But yeah, smile to catch them being good. All right, repeat, reword, and rephrase. I've done this badly. I'm sure I've done this. I think we've all done this, where someone says, "Oh, what do I have to do, Mr. D?" And you go, "I just told you to go to your seat, pick up your English book, but before you do that, make sure you feed the fish, put your shoes back on, and don't touch or hit anyone along the way." What? The instructions, I suppose what I missed there is they've got to be clear, concise instructions. And and if you just repeat them, you're really not helping them. Maybe once or twice, but this is where you've got to go, hang on a minute, Simon, hang on a minute. They're not getting it. It's time to reword it, or try and think of a tweet or the instruction, or just give them, do this and then that, or just one step. And I find with older children, if you can get them to rephrase it back to you, then you're heading in the right direction as well. But knowing that as well, it's important to note that many ADHD kids have language disorders, and they do need some time to process what you're requesting, because they've got to turn them from words into pictures, and then from pictures back into words. And that does take a little bit longer for them too. So repeat, reword, rephrase if you can't make it visual.
For sure. And I mean, that's the old thing again, when, you've been trying to teach a student something so many times and they're just not getting it and you're teaching it the same way. But then they go and see a tutor or something, right? And like, well, why didn't you just say it like that? And it's like, I thought I was. So that's why it's really important to try and think of like 2 or 3 ways to say the same thing, but have them different, because those subtle differences can make a huge difference. And I'm just thinking of one thing, like when I was doing my teacher education program, we were reading Charlotte's Red, and I had a question for a student about, how does Mother Nature tell us the seasons are changing? And it, to me, it made sense. Mother Nature, or how do we know that the seasons are changing? But just the wording confused so many people. And while it made sense in my mind, and I clearly knew what I was thinking, it doesn't mean that everybody else is. And that's one thing that we need to take into consideration, is just because someone has, an idea of what they're saying, it doesn't mean what the other people are going to know what you're saying. And their brain may work differently, right?
Oh, completely, utterly. There was a funny clip a few weeks ago about a comedian who was sharing her experience as a 2E gifted person in a class, and they were doing some work on prepositions. And they said, well, I want you to imagine a box, and I want you to think about your relationship to that box. And, the teacher meant to say behind, above, below, and around, etc. But this student was completely caught up on relationship. A relationship with a box? How can you have a relationship with a box?
Yeah.
And kept on asking these questions because that's what they were focused on. And then I suppose we had this cognitive inflexibility kick in, part of that perfect storm, where it was, I must tag it and put it down there. It's completely inappropriate, but funny.
Well,
But
and
it gives
then
you an insight about the power of our words.
and then asking someone to, I remember hearing something about a teacher asking a child to close their eyes and tell them what they saw. And the kid said black. And she said, no, we're thinking about this. What did you see? Black. They're taking you very literally. When I close my eyes, I see black because the back of my eyelids are black. I'm not seeing this situation that you're describing.
Don't be a smart aleck, Dr. K.
Yeah, exactly. But for the kids that take things so literally, you have to know how to explain what you want them. Like, what are you picturing in your mind, right?
Well, I think having an Asperger or a high-achieving autistic person in your class who are always so literal and always so matter-of-fact, they will improve your teaching and your questioning skills no matter what.
Yeah.
They are a real wake-up call.
For sure.
So the same can be said for the ADHD too. We continue to talk for so long. If the builders start renovating next door, we might have to wind it up. Okay, model your. Is that okay? Is that all right, Dr. K, so far?
Yeah, I think so.
And ladies and gentlemen, if you've got some questions, do type them down there and we'll get to them. I can't see any of them coming up, but I'm sure Dr. K can help us out with those. Look, I suppose this is also about the bridge too, this next one. Model your thinking and sequencing. So it's saying, well, kids, I want you to be able to do this, but work it out for yourselves. And we know that creative problem solving actually doesn't really work at all. The theory and the research is out. To be guided and have something scaffolding will get them to the bridge, and that's when you can do the creative stuff, once you've actually got them there. So this is the old metacognition, and this is what ADHD and neurodiverse people can be actually pretty ordinary at. But we have this great opportunity to model the type of thinking that we would like them. I suppose it's like being the calm for them when they need calmness. And this is about being the model too. So, and I do it simply in class by saying, my pencil's blunt. Okay, I could go sharpen it, but that might make too much noise. I could just look for another one in the spare pencil tray. And then I go and do it. But it's just putting out there that there is some thought before the impulse to actually do it. Or I might say, okay, it's just about lunchtime, boys and girls. I'm going out on duty today. I've got to remember to get my hat. Right, I'm just picturing myself getting my hat. I better take my water out there because it's quite warm today. So you picture yourself doing that, and you're saying it out loud, and then kids will go, oh, okay. Well, that's probably a pretty good idea. Or they may not comment at all. You're not looking for feedback. You're just providing that model as another opportunity to go, this is the type of thinking that we need.
Yeah, for sure. And that's similar, like in teaching, if you're using like a concrete representational abstract model, when you're teaching, you're going from giving them the materials to show them how to do it, and you're giving them that instruction explicitly, and then you're teaching them how to remove that and use it in a way to represent it with like pictures or drawings, and then you replace it with just doing the task, right?
Yep.
So for that example, you're verbally telling them, okay, so I'm going to need my hat and my water, and then once you've done that for a few days, then you can just have a picture on the board and showing them that, oh yeah, you're going to need your hat and your water. And then once they've gotten into that routine, try and help them internalize it, right? So it's that abstract concept of, okay, when I go outside, I need to have my hat and my water.
Yep, spot on. And I think it comes down again, well, we're talking about language as well. Often I just, give either or questions or directions to kids. Sometimes if you're doing three or you have dependent actions, okay, if it becomes windy, then I want you to get up and close the windows for me, but only if it's disturbing you. So you've got to hold three pieces of information in your head, which is dependent on whether or not it's windy. So sometimes looking at the window, looking if it's windy and forgetting about all the other things too. But if you can model, okay, I've got to do this and got to do that, then you're giving them another scaffold, another chance to do it. But yeah, I love the idea of the pictures too, and removing that scaffolds. Great. But I think teachers really find their own solutions themselves.
Oh, of course.
Kind of given the area, and they're so creative. They just come up with the best solutions sometimes. Yeah. And they're the best ones, the genuine, organic ones that come from a little bit of information, and they're the wonderful knowledge of your kids and the class, and putting those together, that's when you come up with the real solutions for kids that are meaningful and will make the difference for them.
Definitely.
I love checklists.
Yes.
I've got to have a list. In fact, when I'm working with my older students too, around getting organised, I found that the old Google Calendar just doesn't cut it. I found calendars with pictures of things, great for younger kids. But yeah, look, I've almost given up on trying to do Google Calendar with
I
kids.
bullet journal.
Sorry?
I bullet journal.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I think we're having more success with that.
Yeah.
But again, I suppose it's just finding something that works for you. When I'm working with the kids and I've got a checklist for the week, I like the old handwritten ones because they can just clearly see what they've done. But if they're making up a Word document, I ask them not to delete it, but to highlight it, because it also reminds them, hey, I've actually achieved this, and just starting, and that's often the biggest challenge, just starting it. Once you come over that hurdle, then they're sometimes away. So if they can see and that in the past they have started and they're finished and they can do this again, that's kind of validating, and it reminds them of the success they've had in the past, and they're away. And that's what we want. We're focusing on the good stuff and reminding them that they can actually achieve this and do this. So checklists are pretty powerful, actually. Although I think I've got lists of lists.
Well, and then using a color coding system for priority, right? So you can have a list and then highlight the priorities in one color, or have a numbering system, just to show them what we need to work on when. And I know one of the strategies that I have in my bullet journal is I have things I can do in 15 minutes or less, right? So, it's very easy to find 10 or 15 minutes here or there. And I have, wiped down the kitchen counters or clean the bathroom sink, stuff like that. So I just remind myself, and I have that cue of, okay, I know I have 15 minutes that I can spend doing something. And I don't have to tax myself to try and figure out what I should do. I can just look at my list and say, oh, yeah, we're going to do those.
Tell me, did you get that from the old Stephen Covey?
I got it from Pinterest.
Yeah, 7, 6. I know, we read so much sometimes. Sometimes I keep coming back to that. But
yeah.
That colour grading and I suppose, that old, you're putting rocks into that container. You put your big things in first, then you put your smaller pebbles and the sand and the water.
There's always room for beer.
I know, a beer with a mate. That's my favourite one. You can always stick a beer in there.
Yeah.
But, that explicitly, that's actually explicitly teaching to the kids the prioritising. And that's what they actually need. Sometimes we just assume that they'll be able to prioritise themselves, or they know which ones to do. But actually modelling that for a while too is really important. Oh, that's a really good point. I'm going to have to remember that. Thanks, Dr. K.
No problem.
Well, I suppose that's really kind of bringing everything together. And so why have we talked about these things? Well, this is all about planning and sequencing and organising and helping kids who are having challenges with their executive function build bridges to cope with the situation that they're in too. Not all of these are going to work. Each presentation is different, and you've got to find solutions that are real and genuine. You know your kids, you know what's expected of them, and you're a creative kind of person. I'm sure the educators will find them. And I'll tell you what, that's the other thing too. If you can make it fun, as I always say, if you can make it fun, make it creative, highlight the personal challenge or meaning, you'll get these kids really wanting to engage and be motivated to engage to improve their own planning and sequencing and organising skills.
Well, and ask them too. Ask them strategies that they think that would work for them, or
Yes.
if they've had them in other areas. Like, say if they have that one area of their hyper focus or their, super interest, ask them how they do things in that situation, because I found that students who have that one true passion, even though they have weak executive functioning in planning and organizing and sequencing, and that passion, not at all.
Yeah.
Right? They can get things perfect for that, but anywhere else it falls apart.
Yeah. And look, I think this is the other reasons why we need to go to executive functioning too, is that if and working towards ADHD, then we know that ODD is one of the next steps. And one of the only things that's going to work with that is a lot of work by Dr. Green, where you do collaborative problem solving. But if you can get in early enough and give the kids a choice over which strategies to use, then you're stopping that tramway, that express down to poor mental health outcomes. And the other thing too is that I find really important is that sometimes we solve problems for our kids way too often. Sometimes we have to let them choose inappropriate or strategies which aren't going to work, and let them fail safely. Let them fail, and then be able to come back to them and go, what can we learn from this? And it's also another opportunity to separate the child from the behaviour and the actions, which I think is vital for this. But, that's developing their problem-solving skills, and that's what they're going to have to do to be more independent, and will make them more resilient in new situations too, and apply them to different areas as well.
Yeah, well, and just for those who don't know, ODD is oppositional defiance disorder.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
thanks for that.
it's so easy to talk in the acronyms when we use them daily, but
I know, and I get parents to try and pull me up all the time, and teachers are the pits about it. They really do it far too often.
Yes.
Pull them up on it.